Hello, hello, welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I'm your librarian, Katrina, and on Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. It is the last Sunday of January 2025, meaning it's time for the next president, making this week's book The Survivor, Bill Clinton in the White House by John F. Harris. The accompanying cocktail is apparently Clinton's favorite. I googled Clinton cocktail and it came right up with a Snakebite, which is equal parts hard cider and beer. You float the beer over the cider. Little backstory, you can use lager, although here in America, for whatever reason, we prefer Guinness. That's cool. I'm going to use Guinness. I prefer stout over lager anyways. So let's do this. Full disclosure, this is the book that I had purchased to read for Clinton initially, but while previewing it last month, I realized that it only covers his White House years. I mean, it literally says Bill Clinton in the White House, and he ain't joking. It's White House years only. So it's not a full biography. I did purchase another Clinton book, this one, First in His Class, the biography of Bill Clinton. However, when I was reading the prologue to this book, I realized that it literally only covers from birth until he gets to the White House. Apparently nobody's capable of writing a full biography of the man, and I refuse to read an autobiography. I'm not reading anybody else's autobiographies. I'm not going to start with Clinton's. Yeah, no joke. One covered birth to inauguration, the other the inauguration until he stepped down, and that's it. So I went with my first pick because it is largely about his time in the White House, and that's what I've been interested in all the presidents, is how were they as president, right? So that's the one I read. All of that is to say that this basic biographical information that I'm about to throw at you comes from Wikipedia. So take that for what it's worth. It's truncated, and it's Wikipedia, which means it is by default very biased. For this first, William Jefferson Clinton was born William Jefferson Blythe III on August 19th, 1946 in Hope, Arkansas. His father, William Jefferson Blythe Jr., died in a car accident 3 months before he was born. Technically, he survived the car accident, but drowned in the water that the car landed in. So, for whatever that's worth. His mother, Virginia Dell Cassidy, later married Roger Clinton Sr., and Clinton took that last name. Do note the different last names of his parents. This is not his mother's fault. Very easy to throw shade on people, especially back in the 1940s. Her marriage to Blythe Jr. was illegal because Blythe Jr. was still legally married to his third wife at the time that he married Cassidy. Not the woman's fault. This is very much the fault of her, dead would-be husband and / baby daddy. Right, I'm going to actually do this very slowly because that's how you float it. Slowly pour it over the top. Requires concentration. Okay. Well, how about that? I managed to float it correctly. But look at that. I floated it correctly. You can see the layers. That means I done it right. Getting better at this. So, all right. Where was I? Okay. Clinton would go on to attend Georgetown University, where he received a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service in 1968 before becoming a Rhodes Scholar to the University College of Oxford. He switched majors a few times while in Oxford, ultimately returning to the United States without receiving a degree. Once back in the States, he studied at Yale Law. In fact, that's why he left Oxford early, was because he got an opportunity to go study at Yale. And hey, you get an opportunity like that, you take it. Especially because now understand, he was very smart. He did not grow up a wealthy man in Arkansas. His entire Georgetown University, Ivy League stuff, was paid for with scholarships. So he was a very smart man, unquestionably. And you have to be a smart man to get a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford and then to get admitted into Yale Law. So nobody can doubt the man's intelligence, just his morals and ethics. We'll come back to that in just a minute. Well, right now it tastes like Guinness. I can taste the Guinness on the top. Isn't that interesting? I'm sure we'll come back to it. He initially received educational deferments on his own draft service to Vietnam. He graduated in 68, so he would have entered in, the 63-64 school year. So Vietnam was very much in swing, and he initially had draft deferment based on his attendance at Georgetown. That ended up not sticking so much because, hey, he already got his bachelor's degree, and they weren't going to extend the draft deferments for law school, basically. He ultimately did sign up very late for the draft, receiving draft number 311. The highest draft number called was 195. All of this would ultimately cost him political clout, not enough to cost him the presidency. He had variously considered reserve service, National Guard service, and ROTC service before finally registering for the draft, all of which would have precluded him being deployed to Vietnam. And that's kind of where the political hit of being a draft dodger came from. People claim that he was hedging his bets and considering all these services just so that he didn't have to sign up for the draft until it was really too late, and so he wouldn't have to serve. Bush Sr. was absolutely horrified that the country voted in a draft dodger. I think that the nation was just... Bush Sr. spent so much time focusing on our overseas work that he didn't pay attention to domestic policy, and Clinton promised to do exactly that. He kind of did. Mixed results anyways. It was at Yale that he would meet his future wife, Hillary Rodham, and they would marry on October 11, 1975, with Chelsea joining the family on February 27, 1980. Clinton ran for Congress in 1974 and lost. He would become Attorney General of Arkansas in 1976 before becoming governor in 79. He lost his first re-election bid, but then was elected again in 83 and would remain governor of Arkansas until he won the presidency in 1992, being sworn in as the nation's 42nd president on January 20th, 1993. Now on to the book. Peripherally mentioned at the very beginning in the prologue is the allegation of draft dodging that is touched on, as well as Clinton's alleged affair with Jennifer Flowers, and that he had Don Henry and Kevin Ives killed in 1987 to cover up other alleged misconduct of the governor. So the Clinton kill machine conspiracy is at least as old as 1987, which is among many reasons this conspiracy refuses to die. It's also one of my favorite conspiracies, mostly because it really, really irritates Democrats when I talk about the Clinton kill machine, which just makes it funnier. Still mostly tastes like Guinness, but that's okay. Clinton's presidency was beset with scandal almost from the very beginning, as he basically had to backtrack on promises made. Promises like, all Haitians would be welcome to the United States, which resulted in like half the population of Haiti, it seems like, joining boat brigades to come to the United States. And then he had to backtrack and say, no, only political refugees, not economic refugees, and they were all economic refugees. Yeah. It created some very interesting optics, of which it took him a very long time to learn. And as he went into the White House, the Whitewater scandal was still percolating back in Arkansas. Jennifer Flowers was still percolating. The Whitewater would be the investigation that Kenneth Starr kind of used to propel himself up the political food chain and acted as the basis for the later Paula Jones investigation, Monica Lewinsky investigation. So let's do a very quick recap, because it is discussed in the book, but I'm going to it's discussed broadly throughout multiple chapters as it becomes relevant to the story. So the author did a great job as far as that goes, but for the purposes of this review, I'm going to condense it into a paragraph. Whitewater was a real estate investment that the Clintons were involved in back in 1979 in Arkansas to build vacation properties along the White River in Arkansas. And this was a failed business venture that never came to anything and would have been a whole lot of nothing but financial disappointment to the Clintons, except that their business partners in the venture were Jim and Susan McDougal, who also owned Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan, which went defunct in 1989. Now, an investigator for the Resolution Trust Corporation, L. Jean Lewis, was alerted to the connection between the presidential nominee Clinton, this is 1992, nominee Clinton and Madison Guaranty, when the New York Times published an article on the connection, and then a few months later, Lewis submitted a criminal referral to the FBI naming the Clintons as witnesses in the Madison Guaranty case. This was initially found to have no merit, but Lewis persisted, and scandal followed. And to be fair, this really was nothing. I mean, it was made something because the Clintons dug their heels in and refused to cooperate with the investigators by not handing over documents relating to their Whitewater investments. But why would they? It was the investments, near as I can tell, near as anybody can tell, were made with their own money, not money from the coffers of Arkansas, which means that it was a private financial loss, not a public one. But during their first year in the White House, the Clintons had not yet embraced the power of optics and how bad those optics looked for them by refusing to cooperate, which kept Whitewater relevant far longer than it probably should have been. The Clintons were very antagonistic towards the press, which is really fascinating because the press seems to be their absolute butt buddies these days. But back in the early 1990s, when they were first stepping into the White House, and basically all through his presidency, he was very antagonistic to the press, very abrupt, very abrasive, and did not care for the press at all. The relevancy of Whitewater would become bigger as Kenneth Starr, sure that there was something there, kept digging in and looking and looking and looking, and it got more legs with the entrance of Paula Jones. Now, Jones had met Clinton prior to her marriage. She was Paula Corbin when they met, and Jones alleged that Clinton had sexually harassed her in 1991, and then she filed her suit in 1994. And this would be big news, as eventually this suit would appear before the Supreme Court, where all 9 justices, all 9 of them, unanimous ruling, including 2 who were Clinton appointees, decided that holding public office did not preclude you from being sued civilly for private actions. This decision allowed the Jones suit to proceed through the courts and would ultimately lead to Clinton's impeachment in 1999. And that sounds like a very far-fetched stream of events, right? But Harris does an amazing job of laying out the course of events that would eventually lead to this impeachment. I do need to drink this today, so let's go. Now, fun fact, there are an alarming number of people who assume that Clinton was impeached for conduct unbecoming, because sexual harassment and extramarital affairs are extremely unbecoming in a married president. Well, the sexual harassment is unbecoming in any president, but the extramarital affair was particularly galling to a nation that still largely identifies as Christian, right? That is not what he was impeached for. He was impeached for lying about his affair, perjury. All right, he lied about his affair with Monica Lewinsky, which began in November of 1995. And you got to wonder, if this affair had come to light before the 96 election, would he have gotten that second term? And we will never know. So Clinton would eventually make the argument that they never had penetration sex. They never actually had intercourse where, penis meets vagina. Very clinical here.
Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
He basically was making the argument that oral sex did not count, which his pollsters did random polling of random voters and discovered that something like 80% of Americans disagreed and said, no, oral sex totally counts. Only extreme loyalists would agree with him on that, basically, trying to give him an out as a decent human being and not a sexual predator who was willing to engage in an extramarital affair with someone young enough to be his daughter. The fact of that did not go unnoticed by Chelsea, as she would actually ask her father not to visit her at college when the affair came to light because she just did not want to see him. I actually think a little bit better of Chelsea now. Hillary's still kind of but whatever. Not my marriage, not my monkeys. Incidentally, it was the fact that Starr's prosecuting team provided an extremely narrow definition of what they thought went on that allowed Clinton to receive the not guilty verdicts on his impeachment for perjury. If the prosecutors had asked generally if there had been any kind of sexual contact, it would have been harder for Clinton to wiggle out of it. Instead, during the deposition, they asked if there had been, and this is an exact quote, contact with the genitalia, anus, groin, breast, inner thigh, or buttocks of any person with an intent to arouse or gratify the sexual desire of any person, end quote. They forgot to ask about the mouth. Guess Republicans didn't get a lot of blowjobs back in the day. And since Clinton famously used a cigar on Ms. Lewinsky, he could technically respond with no. And that technicality was not enough to prevent him from becoming the second president ever impeached, but it was enough for the Senate to return no verdict. Harris paints a picture of a man who is indecisive and easily swayed by those around him. Like Carter, Clinton wanted an open-door policy with all of his staff. Unlike Carter, Clinton could be not a little bit of a jackass and was known to scream at subordinates, and the descriptions provided make me think he's lucky hostile work environment was not really a big thing in the 1990s, or the sexual harassment charge would have been the least of his worries. He might have faced a class action from all White House staffers. He was known to fly off the handle and scream in rage and dress people down for no reason, probably usually having to do with his own failings, if I had to guess. Including a double whammy from one White House volunteer, Kathleen Willey, who accused Clinton, quote, suddenly thrusting himself on her during a personal conversation in his study adjacent to the Oval Office. Clinton vehemently denied her claim. There were several women who had worked around Clinton who were shaken by the allegation and had trouble believing the denial. End quote. I kind of emphasize that last bit. They had trouble believing the denial because this was not the only such report from female staffers. Quite a few female staffers had reported similar incidents with the president. An exception to those who were screamed at was his chief of staff during the start of his second term, Erskine Bowles. Bowles had heard rumor of Clinton's temper tantrums, but had not seen them himself until one day he did. He saw Clinton dressed down two of Bowles' deputies. Quote, taken aback, Bowles asked his aides to leave the Oval Office and serve notice to the president. If you ever do that again, I will leave. End quote. Now, what's interesting about that is that Clinton never yelled at anybody in Bowles' presence again, which tells me basically he was just a bully. One who could absolutely control himself, he just chose not to and saw no reason why he had to because most people backed down to his tantrums. Bowles did leave the chief of staff position before the second term was up, and he left on ethical and moral grounds. Basically, he believed the allegations against Clinton in the Jones and Lewinsky matter and was sickened by them. He thought that was disgusting, that Clinton had engaged in such activities. There have been a lot of questions as to why Hillary stayed with Bill in light of everything, and the author believes it's because they genuinely loved each other. Lacking anything else to fall back on, I can only assume that the champion of women's rights would stay with such a blatant misogynist and sexual predator only out of love. Because wow. I mean, just wow. Like, initially she stayed because she believed him. When he said it was all lies and slander, she's like, okay, I'm with you. You're my husband, I'm with you. And kudos for her. I do get that. All right, I do get that. All right, you should not just absolutely take at face value any old accusation because we all know that bitches be tripping, right? Sometimes they just flat out lie. What I don't understand is eventually the situation with Jones and Lewinsky and everything else progressed to the point where Clinton knew he was going to have to own what happened with Lewinsky. This is the famous "that depends on what the definition of is" comes from, was during that particular moment. But he knew he was going to have to confess, and so he told Hillary that the oral composition of his Lewinsky affair was true. And it's harder to say if she was more hurt by the affair or that he lied about it, because she had never believed, she believed he'd never lied to her before. And it makes you wonder a bit more about Jennifer Flowers, which, again, only briefly mentioned in the prologue of the book. But I know from the Bush 41 book last month that the allegation of the affair was part of the 1992 campaign. It was well known. Did Hillary at that point revisit in her head whatever Bill told her about Flowers during the time that she was coming to grips with his very obvious infidelity with Lewinsky? And I don't care how much you love somebody, how do you forgive that? Don't know. So, on the other hand, as Harris points out, by the time Hillary was set to run for the Senate in New York, Bill owed her big time. He really had no option at this point but to support his spouse on her Senate bid and her burgeoning career, and to leave Arkansas behind for good when she won. And which she did, and he did, and okay then. Look, marriages come back from affairs, they do, and politically it may have done her better to stay in the marriage. I don't know if politics had a part to do with it. The author believes they genuinely love each other, and it certainly could be true. He even acknowledges that they had marriage counseling, and I would love to read the therapist notes on that. I mean, we never will because, HIPAA regulations, and that's fine, but to be a fly on the wall during those counseling sessions, that's all I'm saying. From an international perspective, Clinton wanted to do something about Bosnia and Rwanda as they happened, because those all happened during his first term, right? But he waffled so long on these crises, as these crises emerged, that he was only to come in as a peacekeeper after genocide had already happened in both countries. And it sounds horrifying, and it absolutely is horrifying. It's a little harder to judge him on that because really America has only been the world police since Wilson forced us into that role following World War I. It's only been 100 years now. It had only been, 70 years then? 80 years? 70 years. So, And there are people then and now who would argue, as tragic as those events were, it's still not our place to have been peacekeepers or world police. I would largely be one of them. He was, however, barely on the spot with NATO enforcements in 1999 when Slobodan Milosevic invaded Kosovo and enforced a bombing campaign against Yugoslavia until Milosevic backed down, which he only did because Boris Yeltsin was like, I'm going to stick with my buddy on this one, my buddy Bill over here. So if you're going to continue with this invasion of Kosovo, you are going to be on your own. And so Milosevic backed down. Clinton was aware of Osama bin Laden, as bin Laden had been responsible for embassy attacks in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Clinton did authorize bombing against bin Laden in retaliation, but never pushed tracking him down. I mean, he had resolutions in place to find him, and, if you could kill him without collateral damage, sure, but what he didn't want was a press conference with bin Laden saying America has attacked us and killed innocent people, which, all of that happened anyways, but not on Clinton's watch, so give the man some credit there. The reasons for not digging too, or I don't want to say not digging too deep, not making it a number one priority are outlined in the book, and from a national standpoint, his logic was sound. But as 9/11 unfolded a few months after he stepped down from the top job, he kind of had to wonder, if he had tried harder to stop bin Laden, would the world now be a different place? It's a fair question. If we hadn't trained bin Laden back in the 70s, would the world be a different place? A lot of coulda, shoulda, woulda going on. Clinton's White House career was accurately described by Clinton himself, although he was not speaking in terms of his time as president, but more as his own general zeitgeist. When he said something like he was that big rubber clown doll that you hit as hard as you could when you were a kid and it would just kind of bounce right back up again, he was that clown doll. Doesn't matter how hard you hit him, he's going to bounce up and keep coming. And that zeitgeist is reflected in this book as the author runs us through the massive roller coaster that was the 8 years of the Clinton presidency. High highs and low lows, man. And there's a reason that he called the book The Survivor, because that's what Clinton does. He survives. And as I read this, I genuinely became more convinced that people didn't actually vote for Clinton. They were just unimpressed with who the Republicans were running in 1992 and 1996. Man, why? Hell, the one scandal that absolutely should have had legs and wrecked both Clinton's political aspirations, like both of them, was the Lipo Group, which is not on his Wikipedia page, incidentally. I did search. The Lipo Group is nowhere mentioned in there, and it absolutely should have. The Lipo Group it didn't allegedly. It did. It funneled money from China to assist Clinton's re-election bid in 92. Well, election in 92 and a re-election in 96. That absolutely happened. We know it happened. That's court documents to that effect, as so frequently happens, though, with politics. It's not the politician who benefited who gets in trouble. It's the middleman who facilitated the action. And so on January 11th, 2001, right before Clinton stepped down, isn't that fun? He could have. Did he pardon Riyadi? That's a good question. He did issue pardons. All presidents issue pardons on their way out. Clearly. We just saw that, right? Did he pardon Riyadi, though? Dun, dun. I don't think he did. Nope, he did not. Isn't that interesting? So yeah, Riyadi was sentenced to pay $8.6 million in criminal fines and pled guilty to felony conspiring to defraud the United States by unlawfully reimbursing campaign donors with foreign corporate funds in violation of federal election law. You can Google Bill Clinton and the Lipo Group if you want more details. That is public record. One other thing, though, just because when I was, going through, flipping through all my little tabbies here looking for various points, and this is really interesting because I know that there's a lot going on here, and I know you all adore the Clintons, so I just want to throw this out. Words from Clinton himself, right? At Michigan State University, he denounced militias. Quote, "There is nothing patriotic about hating your country or pretending that you can love your country but despise your government. How dare you suggest that we, in the freest nation on earth, live in tyranny?" It's just food for thought. Don't get me wrong, I'm well aware of the mental gymnastics that all people are capable of doing to justify their own personal beliefs, but That was what Clinton said back in the 1990s. It was interesting to see that Bush 41 was not the only president who experienced problems with Carter butting in on foreign policy. It's just that Clinton didn't feel he could say much about it because Carter was the only living former president who was also a Democrat. Everybody else had died already. Johnson in the 70s, late 72. Truman about then. Of course, Kennedy. FDR. Everybody else had been a Republican. So Carter blithely invited himself to negotiate with Haiti and in Bosnia. Just invited himself, and Clinton sullenly allowed it to happen because Democrats stick together. This book was interesting because I got the sense that the author simultaneously admires and loathes Clinton. Not sure how that happens. I guess you could admire somebody's survival capabilities, right? But yeah, I lean more toward loathe myself. I think he is a sexual predator. One person making the claim is horrifying enough, but enough independent women have reported similar contact with him to add genuine fuel to the fire. But, politicos stick together and forgive each other their trespasses. But heaven help the other guy. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.